Welcome to White Women Wake Up. I'm Jonelle.
And I'm Karen.
Each week, one of us brings a topic to the table, something we've been wrestling with, reading about, or noticing in our own lives.
And the other reacts in real time. No scripts, no prep, just an honest conversation between a mother and a daughter spanning generations about what it means to wake up as white women in a world shaped by bias, power, and inherited patterns.
We don't always agree, and it's not always comfortable, but we show up anyways.
Let's wake up. Hey, Jonelle.
Hi, Karen.
Okay, true disclosure, we are recording this right before our book club tonight. And so we can't really talk about it. So I'm hoping it goes well. I have to say I've enjoyed the book, and I've really enjoyed engaging in poetry this way.
Yeah.
I feel it's opened me up to a new perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like we don't have to, we told the listener that last month too.
Yeah.
We don't have to remind you every day.
Yeah.
We record on Tuesday morning.
But I think it would be weird though if you do the book club and you're all excited about it and expect us to talk about it on this Friday.
Oh,
so that's kind of why.
Okay, it's a great point. For everyone who shows up tonight, so sorry. We will talk about you next week.
Yeah.
But I am sure it'll be a great event.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it. I've been thinking about your anchor bias.
Yes.
And I think, and I don't know if this speaks into that anchor bias that you're talking about, but I've been trying to think about, like, obviously we have first perspectives on things. We have an immediate perspective, or we hear an immediate story. And so there's a flashback of a perspective or a flash of a perspective that we might hold on to. But I was thinking one of the things that I learned in this class I took on critical thinking is the idea that critical thinking is not truly critical thinking if you stay within your own frame of reference. And you often, not only do you do research, but you often have to get another opinion. And often that other opinion should be outside your own circle. And that truly is critical thinking in its formative way. And so one of the things I was thinking about is, as I've entered into these anchor biases, which we naturally do, we can't help it, how can I be intentional to go beyond? And one of the things I've been thinking about is I do need to step outside and critically think, whether it brings in either research or other people's opinions or step outside of my own initial reaction.
Yeah. And I want to be clear. I think that is a great perspective. I think that's such a great shift into how you utilize critical thinking to help you be intentional about your biases. And, I want to be clear, anchor bias was not initially coined as like a negative term because there's so many things in life that we make snap judgment about. And, whether it be I like mashed potatoes or I don't like things of that sort. And a lot of that comes with us from a young age. And so we're not asking everyone to consciously have to think about every decision they are making. But we're talking about when you're holding a strong opinion about something, or even just still a loose bias against something, like reflecting on where that came from. And like you said, being intentional about bringing in some critical thinking around, are there other narratives that I can view or other perspectives I can view that would shift this perspective? Or, and maybe not. Maybe you're on the right side of history with some of your biases. That can also be the case too. But I think it's just always a good reflection to see where are these opinions coming from, especially when it's counter or harmful towards others. So but I love that you brought in critical thinking. Critical thinking is a great tool.
But I think sometimes we use critical thinking as a buzzword. And there's actually a formative process that is part of the process of critical thinking, which is to go beyond yourself. Okay, so
your topic today.
I know. I've been thinking a lot about your topic, and I hope my topic isn't going to be so similar to what your topic was. But as you know, I spent the month kind of being sick. And one of the things Jonelle always talks about when you're sick is to remind yourself that you won't be this way forever. Because when you're in the middle of being sick, you feel like you are going to be that way forever.
We call it flu to funeral in our family.
Yeah. So
if you have the flu, don't immediately plan your funeral.
Yeah.
Like there will be a day that you will be
normal.
Okay again.
My gosh,
You
and
will
I
be
did
fine.
totally. So, but I was thinking a lot about this idea of change.
Okay.
And so my topic today is about change.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you a question in a second, but I'm going to give you a little frame, a reference to it. I'll never forget, and this is probably about maybe 15 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, maybe even 20 years ago. I was with a friend of mine, and I blurted out this statement that I hate change. I hate change. I hate change. And this friend of mine said, "Oh my gosh, I love change. I always get to meet new people, get to new things, get to do different things with change. I love change." And I was so surprised by that response that someone could actually love change, that it's always stayed in the back of my mind. Then the other day, or I've been reading this book, and this book was written. I'm not going to give you the name of the book, and I'm not going to give you the name of the author, and I know you want it, but I'm not going to gossip. I've been reading this book, and it was written in 2003.
Okay.
And it was written by a white author in 2003. Obviously, she was a lot younger, but she's my age, and a well-respected author with kind of good self-help advice. And so I liked some of the advice. I liked a lot of the advice. The language in the dialogue in which she used, I was completely uncomfortable with.
Okay.
And I realized, oh my gosh, I have really changed. Even to the language, like she automatically assumed prostitutes would have venereal diseases. That was something that she used as an example of something. And I thought, that's really not a fair judgment. And like one of the things that you've worked on with me is this language of comparing, like I need to use my own story, not use other people's stories to just assume or stereotype.
Or not compare your stories to others as well when they're speaking.
So anyways, I just thought, wow, I have really changed, that I could actually hear, and some of the things she said were even more uncomfortable, but that I could actually hear how language or the way we describe things has really changed. And I do need to say, I think a lot of it is your generation, younger generation, making us become more aware of the language we use. But anyways, this is a topic on change.
That. How do you feel about change then?
Well, I was actually, first of all, it does make you think that what did I say in my past, or what have I done in my past that is not congruent with who I am today. And I mean, and I've done a lot, so I'm sure there's a lot of it there. But so that part is a little fragile, but but that's part of the vulnerability of change, right? So I want to ask you.
Can I wait?
Because,
before you jump in, can I tell you a story that reminded me of?
Yeah.
So very similar, potentially similar time frame, I would say 15 years ago for myself as well. I was also having a conversation about hating change. I hate being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I am, there's something about my life, and anyone who loves stars or astrology, I'm a Scorpio rising, and Scorpios always are phoenixes rising out of the ashes. So their life is constantly about change and shifting and reinventing themselves, which describes me in a nutshell. I'm always shifting and changing. But I think a lot of people think I like it. And there's definitely times when it's uncomfortable. I've now embraced it. But anyways, I was at this period of my time where I said, same thing. I hate change. I hate being uncomfortable. I was actually met with someone saying, yeah, so does everyone.
Yeah. And so this is part of this is part of this discussion today.
And that was such a shift for me with change around, I'm not unique in this perspective of not liking the uncomfortability that sometimes change brings.
Yes.
So anyways, so I love it's similar time frames where clearly we were both doing a lot of change and we were not comfortable with it, but two different responses around.
Yeah. Well, and I have to say, I was really grateful for this friend's positive reflection on change, because it did open me up to be like, okay, change occurs.
Yeah, it does. There. Change happens.
So one of the things that, so I've done some studies, and Jonelle, I have to say, being with Jonelle over the last year in this setting, you do such a great job in delivering your data. You do as well.
No,
but I'm going to try. I'm changing.
You're changing. So give yourself compliments and grace.
So in my research,
are great.
This was research by a gentleman named Shaul Arag in the Journal of Applied Psychology. I might be saying his name wrong, in 2003. And 4 reasons why people resist change.
Okay.
First of all, human nature loves routine.
Yeah.
And so a routine isn't about laziness. It's about the brain conserving energy. Yeah. And so we look for familiar patterns. We run on autopilot. New patterns require mental effort. So that's one reason we might feel a little threatened, because we like routine. Second is might be uncomfortable with our emotional reaction to imposed change. So it's not that we don't care, but it's kind of like in change that's imposed on us. We respond often like it's it's like a threat. And so we're feeling threatened, like our body goes into fight and flight. It's like a danger when change is imposed on us. Something you have said to me a lot, and I've had to really work on it because I'm not, it's a struggle, is a third one of the reasons he says, Shaul Org says, is that we have such a short-term focus that we have a difficulty seeing long-term benefits. Like, for example, reading this book, if you had told me in 2003, reading this particular author, who I've always liked, would use language that eventually I would understand, and I understand it to be offensive, I would have been like, what? How would I have learned to understand that? Because that's like, 20-some years, right? Of really working with language and how we have to look at human beings differently. And so this short-term focus, this is why sustained community and accountability matter, because we are comfortable in a short-term focus, not a long-term. Then I think this goes to what you were talking about, and this was another thing, this anchor bias, but this cognitive rigidity, that's the word, that we have a difficulty updating our beliefs, that when information challenges our existing views, we have a hard time updating those views. And so it just is difficult. And so, anyways, response to some of this before I go on, because I have more. I'm trying to be like Jonelle.
No, you're great. You need to give yourself so much more credit and so much. On a side note, I edit the TikTok videos and I edit the YouTube videos. And so I feel the opposite of you. I watch us and I watch these clips and I think, I am so jumpy. I don't finish my sentence. I'm going from one place to the other. And Karen is so articulate and smooth.
This is our affirmation day.
It is our affirmation day. But anyways, so point
change,
is, be kind to yourself.
Change.
Yeah, so change. I mean, I think as I pointed out, I've shifted my perspective a lot over the last, decade, whereas change, especially from that pivotal moment of saying no one likes change, I really did shift. And as you've seen, I've become a huge proponent of change. Yeah. And I don't stick with a perspective for a very long time. Like I'm very much, as I spoke last week, Grandma, if I get new information and new perspectives, I easily can shift. I think one of my greatest leadership quotes, and I hope I get it wrong, but a great leader.
Wrong or right?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I hope I get it right. But one of my favorite leadership quotes is, a great leader has strong perspectives that are loosely held.
Oh, yeah. You've said that
Yeah,
before.
and I love that because it really states that you are clear, you're strong, you're guided and authentic, but you are not holding on so tightly that with new information you can't shift.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I kind of hear when you talk about change and the change perspective there. And this is kind of what I think why I was so shocked by anchor bias of last week is because it's not a narrative that I see myself falling into as often, though it did kind of a light bulb of like, okay, well, I do need to check myself because it is, again, some of that subconscious bias that like, where am I anchor biasing and not even recognizing it? But yeah, that's kind of where I go. I think change, I mean, my whole consulting thing is on continuous improvement and change and all of that. And so I think change
I think your
is a
word that
great thing.
is hitting me is new information.
Yeah.
Because I do think, we're living in a time right now, we can't help it. We can Google search anything. We have AI. I mean, really, if you compare it to another time in history, it was with Gutenberg and the press, right? And knowledge became so prevalent, and out of that became the Enlightenment
or the Industrial
period,
Revolution. And they're
the
building all
Renaissance.
the machines. Exactly.
And so right now we're getting so much new information that that we need to hold it in a space of openness. Anyways, but
speaking of new information, it is interesting though, but are we in a period too, and maybe this is more my generation, of overload of information? I think people talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
Like I find myself scrolling through TikTok, and I know a lot of people do this, scroll through social media, and you're almost just scrolling to get the high of scrolling. And I'm not intentionally doing high, but I notice myself barely even focusing on what's going through. And then same thing, I also save off all of this stuff because I find the information great, but I don't even watch the video all the way through. I hear a clip, I'm like, this is great. And so we're not also taking in all the information to create that change, which is a total side note.
But I do think though that that's actually a really interesting point, because if one of the reasons we don't want change is because of mental energy, and we're expending all this mental energy in these other activities through anxiety, through scrolling, we do need to be careful. What can we do to bring ourselves back to a space that we can be open to change?
Or in my mind, it's where do I sort the information? I think that's my biggest thing I'm actually working on a new vibe coding app. Sorry, everyone. This is not a sports podcast, nor is it a tech podcast, but yet we'll talk about it. But I'm trying to work on another one where when I save certain TikTok videos, have it automatically get uploaded and narrated so it filters and gives me the relevant information that I'm looking for. If that makes sense.
So because a clear RSS feed.
Exactly. Because right now, again, I'm in information overload as I'm building out stuff for my business, as I'm building out way into vibe coding and trying to figure out what is the needed information and what is too much information or what is information for later. And so I think I use an example because I feel like that is the world in itself coming at us these days. Is there's so much information, there's so many outlets of information that it is overloading our brains to sort and pair them.
And so then it's interesting now again, anyone who's a therapist out there, this is obviously probably a study, but this idea that because we have so much information, because we have so much availability to ideas, are becoming less open to change because we're shutting down.
I was just about to say that. And so then are we digging our heels in some of our anchor bias because it's easier to hold on to the first narrative.
Studies. Okay, but I want to go back to this idea of change. Why does change feel so hard? Because it is biology. It is not a character flaw. And I think, and it's funny, as I was doing more research on this, because I wanted to be reminded, it reminded me of freshman year psychology, because it has to do with our amygdala. Our amygdala, it's the brain's threat detection center. So it activates the same fight or flight. So anytime we feel like there might be some sort of change or some change occurring, whether it's positive or negative, it activates the amygdala. Then the brain also has a strong preferences to the cognitive efficiency. So that is stored, these patterns and habits are stored in our basal ganglia. So remember all of this? I know. So we want to run on autopilot to conserve efficiency. And these new behaviors, this change makes us respond to our prefrontal cortex. So we actually work harder. Got it?
Exactly.
And then the other part of this is called loss aversion. And so loss aversion tells us that humans feel the pain of losing something about twice as intensely as they feel the pleasure of gaining something equivalent. So we don't want this idea if change automatically threatens us as a loss, not a gain. Like, it's kind of funny, even going back to the way I viewed change versus the way my friend viewed change. I viewed it as a loss. Mm-hmm. She viewed it as a gain.
Yeah.
My aversion was even more triggered. So the thing is good about our brain is just the science of neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
That we actually can change that. Our brain can build new pathways. But it's not automatic, right?
Yeah.
We need to work on how to change that cycle.
And for listeners out there who don't know us, my brother, her son, is in cell research, AI generation. Yeah. So we are small experts, not really in this area.
Mini.
My brother would laugh at us. But we have learned a lot about a lot of these subjects and how cells can regenerate themselves and neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
So I'm just laughing because I think Johnny would be proud.
But isn't that an interesting thing that in our body, our cells, one thing, actually, it's interesting as we're having this topic, one podcast person that I like is Rob Bell. I might lose our whole following. But one thing that Rob Bell said that has opened me to change or opened me to perspectives is he said our heart is bigger than we give it credit for, that we have the capability of holding great loss and great joy. And so every time I feel that risk aversion to loss, I also remind myself at the same time, I have that capability of great joy. And so I don't know if maybe that's opened. I don't know.
I think it has.
Psychologically, is it open this opportunity to change?
Well, and that's what I was going to kind of say as you started unfolding this. I think so often we've talked about this as good change and bad change in the past, or with good stress and bad stress. Yeah. As in, I think a lot of people are adverse to change because sometimes change can mean really scary things. Yeah. It can mean the loss. It can mean a breakup.
Divorce,
it can mean divorce.
Death,
it can mean
grief.
death. It can mean losing your house, losing a job. And so I do think maybe reflecting on your friend who felt change was a great thing, they might have been having good change in their life at the time. And not to say that but it shifts perspective slightly on why some of us might be more fearful of change than others. We've also talked about this where station of life is we went through a period of a lot of loss. Well, we had family friends who were going through a period of a lot of gain, like weddings and babies. And both of them bring stress, but they're different types of stress. Yeah. Both of them bring change, but one is good change, one is bad change. And so I would still give some maybe grace to listeners a little bit if you're still in the space that change is scary, it's okay if you're coming from a place of scary change.
Yeah.
Because I would say right now I'm in a place of great change, like now a couple years out. And so change to me isn't as scary of a word as maybe it was a couple years ago.
But I think the point is, what I'm trying to make is, the fear of change is biological.
Totally.
And that the fear that we have every right to feel fearful of change, and it's going to trigger these emotions.
Yeah.
The challenges, and here's the challenge.
I was just saying I can see why some might fear it more than others.
Yeah.
Based on history of
Yeah.
But I totally see it's no one's fault.
But I think one of the challenges, and especially as our demographics are changing, as our world is changing, as we're embracing different family structures, the way in which, marriage, our identities, our sexuality, there's so much change going on. Change of how we view the world from as white women, from an individual perspective to a collective perspective. All of that can be very threatening. All of that can make us fight or flight.
Yeah.
Here's the good news, though. And I think that like, if you're willing to live out that discomfort, if you're willing to acknowledge that it's biological, like you said you were doing, and you said, like, you do this a lot. I've heard you, literally say, Mom, I'm not going to just focus on the immediate. I'm going to see where the benefits of this change are, especially as anytime it's related to remodeling. But no, you really helped me on that. I mean, but the thing is, I think the reason
you were just going to sound like it was be so profound, and then it's like anytime. But
I think the reason I wanted to do this subject is because our worlds are changing, relationships are changing, the way that we engage in one another, the way that we assumed, our anchor biases, all of these things are changing, and we can choose to not go with it and to fight it and be in that fight and flight. We can choose to let our brain take over, or we can allow for the neuroplasticity. So one of the things that they say is, if we are willing to change, one thing is your brain literally gets better. The neuroplasticity research widely validated the same brain that resists change is also capable of rewiring itself at any age. This is called neuroplasticity, and this is one of the most important findings in modern neuroscience. And my example of reading that book was amazing because I really have changed.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow. I mean, and one of the things that was so interesting about reading that text was I could see all the weird microaggressions in that text that it made me go, whoa, is this the way that I've communicated, and why maybe people didn't respond, BIPOC persons respond to me favorably in the past. And so because my communication, I was giving out messages that were microaggressive messages.
Well, it's like the example I brought up last week with Grandma, how she was always a proponent of gaining new information and shifting her perspective. So her neuroplasties were firing.
The other thing it does is it actually helps us to become more resilient. And so when we practice change, even small changes, we build what researchers call adaptability. And adaptability doesn't stay in one line. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that individuals who develop flexibility in their approach to change are 40% more resilient and better equipped to handle future challenges. And I think that this is really true in that. Now, again, something's going to happen in my life, and I'll fail at this. But I do feel like, for example, my university has gone through a huge change, huge staffing reduction. I'm teaching different classes I've never taught before. And I do feel, as an example of that, I didn't think about this until now, but the resilience that I've had to face is allowing me to be adaptable and not angry. But figuring it out and actually really enjoying these students that I'm teaching right now. And so becoming more resilient. Another one is, if you moved, and you've talked about this a lot, moving from a fixed identity to a growing one. This was done by a Stanford professor, Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. A fixed mindset is I am who I am, my character, my beliefs, my abilities, versus my growth mindset is I am who I'm becoming.
Yeah.
My beliefs and abilities can develop, and this makes challenges feel like information, not threats.
Yeah.
And then a couple more, hang on. Your relationships actually get deeper because they're more authentic.
Oh, I believe that.
Your calling us to overcome difficulties are often the catalyst for personal growth and the development of resilient behaviors. And you get to know yourself better. So this Robin Hanley, a resilience scholar, one of the most underrated gifts of doing hard personal change is self-knowledge.
Yeah.
So truly getting to understand information required on how you shift and change yourself. And so I guess from someone who was a hard and fast believer of hating change to someone that has changed over the years, there's good news that we actually can. So anyways, this is my
I love
topic.
that. I think it's such a great topic. I think especially for you, like you said, I was a pusher of change and you didn't always like that in me.
I remember.
That was a hard tension between us. And I think you came up with some really great points. I think for anyone out there who is still struggling to maybe shift or change and it's not easy.
Yeah.
And we talk about, but I feel like the discomfort grows easier.
Yeah.
I think the tension of discomfort.
But okay, here I want to step into that real quick. So even a week ago, we had a conversation about a project I'm working on, and my go-to is to do everything myself.
Oh, yeah.
And now granted, I was sick, and so I responded really strong. You said, well, why don't you ask this person? And I said, would you stop it? I don't want to ask that person, right? My new mindset, I did call you back, probably took a day or so, and I apologized, and I said, wow, I don't know where that was coming from, but it was a perfect example of feeling the threat of change because my core self is to do everything myself. But you're right. I do need help on this project. I can't do it alone. And that's part of change, right? And I'm getting to know myself. I took time to reflect on why did I get so threatened? Why was I so angry? What could I do differently about that?
Well, and that is actually such a great example for both of us on change and healthy relationships, because you're right. You asked me for my perspective. I gave you my perspective. It is not what you were steering me towards. It clearly was not what you wanted to hear. You got mad at me. And in the past, because we're all people pleasers in our household or in our family structure, I would have then returned and gotten mad at you for getting mad at me because it was frustrating. And instead, I stepped out of the conversation and I said, I don't appreciate being talked to that way when I was asked for my opinion. Please don't do that in the future. And so I was able to set clear, calm boundaries.
And I huffed away.
And you huffed away and you weren't mad, but the thing what was really great about that is neither of us were like mad at each other. But I walked away feeling not shamed, but
I was able to really look at that and say, wait a second. I am changing. I am reaching for help.
Yeah.
I know I need help. And so I guess I just want to encourage us, and I don't know what...
Well, but I guess that's what I'm trying to say is I also changed walking away. My previous MO would have been I would have held on to that. I would have felt shamed. I would have felt sad. I would have tried to then fix or done whatever. And then you just it perpetuates bad cycles. So I think that conversation was a perfect example of tension still happens.
Yeah, we're not perfect.
No one's perfect, but we really did handle ourselves with change in a different way than we have.
Yeah. So anyways, I would think about that as, yes, change is biologically threatening. And yet we know that our brain has this neuroplasticity that we can actually work towards change. And the benefits of change are really good, are really great.
And it's like we say in our intro, it's not always comfortable. We're not here to make comfortable conversations, but we hope we can learn and guide us in the right mindset. So thank you, everyone, so much for joining us on White Women Wake Up. We hope today's conversation sparked something in you, whether it's a reflection, a new question, or a deeper commitment to showing up with empathy and accountability. If you found this episode meaningful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can also connect with us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Substack, or at whitewomenwakeup.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, be open, and keep waking up. Bye.
Quick playback. We want to be upfront when we bring research to this show. We cite our sources because you deserve more than just our opinions. Today's research draws on psychologist Shaul Arag's landmark study on resistance to change, Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman's work on loss aversion, and 2020 National Institute of Mental Health funded study on ambivalent white racial consciousness, and Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck's groundbreaking work on the growth mindset. We're not researchers. We are two white women doing our own work out loud, but we're going to back it up.